Origin of the lean startup. I am one of those people who grew up programming computers, and so my journey to thinking about entrepreneurship and management has taken a circuitous path. I have always worked on the product development side on my industry. My partners and bosses were managers or marketers, and my peer work in engineering and operation. Throughout my career, I kept having the experience of working incredibly hard on products that ultimately failed in the marketplace. At first, largely because of my background, I viewed these and technical problems that required technical solution, better architecture, a better engineering process, better discipline, focus, or product vision. These supposed fixes led to still more failures. So I read everything I could get my hands on and was blessed to have had some of the top minds in Silicon Valley as my mentors. By the time I became a co founder of IMVU, I was hungry for new ideas about how to build a company. I was fortunate to have co-founders who were willing to experiment with new approaches. They were fed up as I was by the failure of traditional thinking. Also, we were lucky to have Steve Blank as an investor and advisor. Back in 2004, Steve had just begun preaching a new ideas. The business and the marketing functions of a startup should be considered as important as engineering and product development, and therefore deserve an equally rigorous methodology to guide them. He called that methodology customer development, and it offered insight and guidance to my daily work as an entrepreneur. Meanwhile, I was building IMVU's product development team using some of the unorthodox method I mentioned earlier, measured against the traditional theories of product development I had been trained on in my career. These methods did not make sense, yet I could see firsthand that they were working. I struggled to explain the practices to new employees, investor, and the founder of the other companies. We lack a common language for describing them and concrete principles in understanding them. I began to search outside entrepreneurship for ideas that could help me make sense of my experience. I began to study other industries, especially manufacturing, from which most modern theories of management derive. I study lean manufacturing, a process that originated in Japan with the Toyota production system, a completely new way of thinking about the manufacturing of physical goods. I found that by applying ideas from lean manufacturing to my own entrepreneurial challenges with a few tweaks and changes, I had the beginnings of a framework for making sense of them. This line of thought evolved in the lean startup, the application of lean thinking of the process of innovation. IMVU become a tremendous success. IMVU customers have created more than 60 million avatars. It is a profitable company with annual revenue of more than 50 million in 2011, employing with employing more than 100 people in our current office in Mountain View, California. IMVU virtual goods catalog, which seems so risky years, now has more than 6 million items in it. More than 7,000 are added every day, almost all created by customer. As a result of IMVU's success, I began to be asked for advice by other startups and venture capitalists. When I would describe my experience at IMVU, I was often met with blank stares or extreme skepticism. The most common reply was that could never work. My experience so flew in the face of conventional thinking that the most people, even in the innovation hub of Silicon Valley, could not wrap their minds around it. Then I started to write first on a blog called Startup Lessons Learned and Speak at Conference, and to companies, startup and venture capitalists, to anyone who would listen in the process of being called on to defend and explain my insight. And with the collaboration of other writers, thinkers, and entrepreneurs, I had a chance to refine and develop the theory of the lean startup beyond its rudimentary beginnings. My hope all along was to find ways to eliminate the tremendous waste I was all around me, and startup that built products nobody wanted, new products pulled from the shelf out, countless dreams unrealized. Eventually, the lean startup idea blossomed into a global movement. Entrepreneur begins forming local in-person groups to discuss and apply lean startup ideas. There are now organized communities of practice in more than 100 cities around the world. My travel have taken me across countries and continents. Everywhere I have seen the sign of a new entrepreneur renaissance. The startup movement is making entrepreneurship accessible to a whole new generation of founders who are hungry for new ideas about how to build successful companies. Although my background is in high tech software entrepreneurship, the movement has grown way beyond those roots because thousands of entrepreneurs are putting lean startup principles to work in every conceivable industry. Conceivable industry. I've had the chance to work with entrepreneurs in companies of all sizes in different industries and even in the government. This journey has taken me to places I never imagined. I've seen from the world's most elite venture capitalists to Fortune 500 boardrooms to the Pentagon. The most nervous I have ever been in the meeting was when I was attempting to explain lean startup principles to the chief information officer to the US Army, who is three-star general for the record. He was extremely open to new ideas, even from a civilian like me. Pretty soon, I realized that it was time to focus on the lean startup movement full time. My mission to improve the success rate of new innovative products worldwide. The result is the book you are reading, The Lean Startup Method. This is a book for entrepreneurs and the people who hold them accountable. The five principles of the lean startup, which inform all three parts of this book, are as follow. Entrepreneurs are everywhere. You don't have to work in a garage to be in a startup. The concept of entrepreneurship includes anyone who works within my definition of a startup, a human institution designed to create new products and services under condition of extreme uncertainty. That means entrepreneurs are everywhere, and the lean startup approach can work in any size company, even a very large enterprise in any sector or industry. Entrepreneurship, number second, entrepreneurship is management. A startup is an institution, not just a product, and so it's require a new kind of management, especially geared to its context of extreme uncertainty. In fact, as I will argue later, I believe entrepreneurs should be considered a job title in all modern companies that depend on innovation for their future growth. Number three, validate learning. Startup exists not just to make stuff, make money, or even serve customer. They exist to learn how to build a sustainable business. This learning can be validated scientifically by running frequent experiments that allow entrepreneurs to test each element of their vision. Number four, build, Major learn. The fundamental activity of a startup is to turn ideas into product, measure how customers respond, and then learn whether to pivot or preserve all successful startup processes should be geared to accelerate that feedback loop. Number five, innovation accounting to improve entrepreneur outcomes and hold innovators accountable. We need to focus on the boring stuff, how to measure progress, how to set up milestones, and how to prioritize work. This requires new kind of accounting design for a startup and the people who hold them accountable. Why startup fail? Why are startups failing so badly everywhere we look? The first problem is the allure of a good plan, a solid strategy, and through market search in earlier eras, these things were indicators of likely success. The overwhelming temptation is to apply them to startup too. But this doesn't work because startups operate with too much uncertainty. Startups do not yet know who their customer is and or what their product should be. As the world becomes more uncertain, it gets harder and harder to predict the future. The old management methods are not up to the task. Planning and forecasting are only accurate when based on a long, stable operating history and relatively static environment. Startup have neither. The second problem is that after seeing traditional management fail to solve this problem, some entrepreneurs and investors have thrown up their hands and adopted the just do it school of a startup. This school believes that if management is the problem, chaos is the answer. Unfortunately, as I can attest firsthand, this doesn't work either. It may seem counter intuitive to think that something as disruptive, innovative, and chaotic as a startup can be managed, or to be accurate, must be managed. Most people think of process and management as boring and dull, whereas startups are dynamic and exciting. But what is actually exciting is to see startups succeed and change the world. The passion, energy, and vision that people brings to these new ventures are resources too precious to waste. We can and must do better. This book is about how this book is organized. This book is divided into three parts: vision, steer, and accelerate. Vision makes the case for a new discipline of entrepreneur management. I identify who is an entrepreneur, define a startup, and articulate a new way of a startup to gauge if they are making progress. Call validated learning. To achieve that learning, will see that a startup in a garage or inside the enterprise can use scientific experiments to discover how to build a sustainable business. Steer deeps into the lean startup method in detail, showing one major trend through the core: build, measure, learn feedback loop, beginning with leap of faith assumption that cry out for rigorous testing. You will learn how to build a minimum viable product to test those assumptions, a new accounting system for evaluating whether you are making progress, and a method for deciding whether to pivot, changing course with the foot anchored to the ground or the preserve. In Accelerate, will explore techniques that enable lean startup to speed through the build, measure, learn feedback loop as quickly as possible, even as they scale. We'll explore lean manufacturing concepts that are applicable to startup too, such as the power of small batches. We'll also discuss organizational designs, how product grow, and how to apply lean startup principles beyond the proverbial garage, even inside the world's largest company. Management second century. As a society, we have a proven set of techniques for managing big companies, and we know the best practices for building physical products. But when it comes to startup and innovation, we are still shooting in the dark. We are revolving on vision, chasing the great man who can make magic happen, or trying to analyze our new products to that. These are new problems born of the success of management in the 20th century. This book attempts to put entrepreneurship and innovation on a rigorous footing. We are at the dawn of management's second century. It is our challenge to do something great with the opportunity we have been given. The lean startup movement seek to ensure that those of us who long to build the next big thing will have the tool we need to change the world. Part 1, Vision starts. Entrepreneur management. Building a startup is an exercise in institution building, thus it necessarily involves management. This often comes as a surprise to aspiring entrepreneur because their association with these two words are so diametrically opposed. Entrepreneurs are rightly wary of implementing traditional management practices early in a stage, afraid that they will invite bureaucracy of stifle creativity. Entrepreneurs have been trying to fit the square peg of their unique problem into the round hole of general management for decades. As a result, many entrepreneurs take a just do it attitude, avoiding all forms of management process and discipline. Unfortunately, this approach leads to chaos more often than it does to success. I should know my first startup failure were all of this kind. The tremendous success of general management over the last century has provided unprecedented material abundance, but those management principles are ill suited to handle the chaos and the uncertainty that a startup must face. I believe that entrepreneurship requires a managerial discipline to harness the entrepreneur opportunity we have been given. There are more entrepreneurs operating today than at any previous time in history. This has been made possible by dramatic change in the global economy. To cite but one example, one often hears commentators lament the loss of manufacturing jobs in the United States over the previous 2 decades, but one rarely hears about a corresponding loss of manufacturing capability. That's because total manufacturing output in the United States is increasing by 15% in the last decades, even as jobs continue to be lost. See the charts below. In effect, the huge productivity increase made possible by modern management and technology has created more productive capacity than firms now what to do with. We are living through unprecedented worldwide entrepreneurial re- 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 renaissance, but this opportunity is laced with peril because we lack a coherent management paradigm for new innovators ventures. We are throwing our excess capacity around with while abundant. Despite this lack of rigor, we are finding some ways to make money, but for every success there are far too many failures. Product pull from shelf mere weeks after being launched, high profile startups lauded in the press and forgetting a few months later, new products that wind up being used by the nobody. What makes these failures particularly painful is not just the economic damage done to individual employees, company and investor. They are also a colossal waste of our civilization most precious resource, the time, passion, and skill of its people. The lean startup movement is dedicated to preventing these failures. Manufacturing total capacity production ratio scale 2002 budget equal to 100 1970 to 2010. Shaded areas indicate US recession. All imply durable good manufacturing. Source US Department of Labor, Bureau of Labor Statistics. Thousands. Shaded area indicate US recession. The roots of the lean startup. The lean startup take its name from the lean manufacturing revolution that Tichi Ono and Shigo Shingo are credited with developing at Toyota. Lean thinking is radically all Lean thinking is radically altering the way supply chain and production systems are run. Among its tenets are drawing on the knowledge and creativity of individual workers, the shrinking of batch sizes, just-in-time production and inventory control, and acceleration of cycle time. It taught the world the difference between value creating activities and the waste and showed how to build quality into product from the inside out. The lean startup adopts these ideas to the context of entrepreneurship, proposing the entrepreneurs judge their progress differently from the way other kind of ventures do. Progress in manufacturing is measured by the production of high quality physical good. As we'll see in chapter 3, the lean startup use a different unit of progress called validated learning with scientific learning as our yardstick. We can discover and eliminate the source of waste that are plugging entrepreneurship. A comprehensive theory of entrepreneurship should address all the functions of an early stage venture: vision and concept, products development, marketing and sales, scaling up, partnership and distribution, and structure and organizing design. It has to provide a method for manufacturing measuring progress in the context of extreme uncertainty. It can give entrepreneur clear guidance on that how to make the many trade-off decisions they face, whether and when to invest in progress, formulating planning and creating infrastructure, when to go it alone and when to partner, when to respond to feedback and when to stick with vision, and how and when to invest in scaling the business. Most of all, it must allow entrepreneur to make testable prediction. For example, consider the recommendation that you build cross functional teams and hold them accountable to what we call learning milestone. Instead of organizing your company into strict functional department, marketing, sales, information technology, human resources, etc., that hold people accountable for performing well in their specialized area. See chapter 7. Perhaps you agree with the recommendation, or perhaps you are skeptical. Either way, if you decide to implement it, I predict that you pretty quickly will get feedback from your team that the new process is reducing their productivity. They will ask to go back to the old ways of working, in which they had the opportunity to say stay efficient by working in large batches and passing work between departments. It's safe to predict this result, and not just because I have seen it many times in the companies I work with. It is straightforward prediction of the lean startup theory itself. When people are used to evaluating their productivity locally, they feel that a good day is one in which they did their job well all day. When I work as a programmer, that means 8 straight hours of programming without interruption. That was a good day. In contrast, if I was interrupted with cushion process or heaven forbid meeting, I felt bad. What did I really accomplish that day? Code and product features were tangible to me. I could see them, understand them, and show them off. Learning, by contrast, is frustratingly intangible. The lean startup asks people to start measuring their productivity differently because a startup often accidentally builds something nobody wants. It doesn't matter much if they do it on time and on budget. The goal of a startup is to figure out the right thing to build, the thing customer want and will pay for as quickly as possible. In other words, the lean startup is a new way of looking at the development of innovative new products that emphasizes fast iteration and customer insight, a huge vision and great ambition all at the same time. Henry Ford is one of the most successful and celebrated entrepreneur of all time, since the idea of management has been bound up with the history of automobile since its first days. I believe it is fitting to use the automobile as a metaphor for a startup. An internal combustion automobile is powered by two important and very different feedback loops. The first feedback loop is deep inside the engine. Before Henry Ford was a famous CEO, he was an engineer. He spent his days and nights tinkering in his garage with the precise mechanic of getting the engine cylinder cylinders to move. Each tiny explosion within the cylinder provides the motive force to turn the wheels but also drive the ignition of the next explosion. Unless the timing of this feedback loop is managed precisely, the engine will sputter and break down. Startup have a similar engine that I call the engine of growth. The market and the customers for startups are diverse. A toy company, a consulting firm, and a manufacturing plant may not seem like they have much in common, but we'll see they operate with the same engine of growth. Every new vision of a product, every new feature, and every new marketing program is an attempt to improve this engine of growth, like Henry Ford tinkering in his garage. Not all of these changes run out to be improvement. New products development happens in fits and starts. Much of the time in a startup life is spent tuning the engine by making improvement in product, marketing, or operation. The second important feedback loop in an automobile is between the driver and the steering wheel. This feedback is so immediate and automatic that we often don't think about it, but it is strain that differentiate driving from most other forms of transportation. If you have a daily commute, you probably know the route so well that your hand seems to steer you there on their own accord. We can practically drive the route in our sleep. Yet, if I ask you to close your eyes and write down exactly how to get to your office, not the street direction, but every action you need to take, every push of hand on wheels and foot on pedal, you find it impossible. The geography of driving it incredibly complex when one slow down to think about it. By contrast, a rocket ship requires just this kind of in advanced calibration. It must be launched with the most precise instruction on what to do, every thrust, every firing on a booster, and every change in direction. The tiniest error at the point of launch could yield catastrophic result thousands of miles later. Unfortunately, too many startup business plans look more like prescribe the step to take and the result to expect in excruciating detail, and as in planning to launch a rocket, they are set up in such a way that even tiny errors in assumptions can lead to catastrophic outcomes. Our company One company I work with had the misfortune of forecasting significant customer adoption in the millions for one of its new products powered by a splashy launch. The company successfully executed its plan. Unfortunately, customers did not flock to the product in great numbers. Even worse, the company had invested in massive infrastructure, hiring, and support to handle the influx of customer is expected. When the customer failed to materialize, the company had committed itself so completely that they could not adapt in time. They had achieved failure successfully, faithfully, and rigorously executing a plan that turned out to have been utterly flawed. The lean startup method, in contrast, is designed to teach you how to drive a startup instead of making complex plans that are based on a lot of assumptions. You can make constant adjustment with a steering wheel called the build measure learn feedback loop. Through this process of steering, we can learn when and if it's time to make a sharp turn call, a pivot, or whether we should preserve along our current path. Once we have an engine that's revved up, the lean startup offers method to scale and grow the business with maximum acceleration. Throughout the process of driving, you always have a clear idea of where you are going. If you are computing if you're commuting to work, you don't give up because there's a detour in the road or you made a wrong turn. You remain thoroughly focused on getting to your destination. Startup also have a true north, a destination in mind, creating a thriving and a world-changing business. I call that a startup vision. To achieve that vision, startup employ a strategy which includes a business model, a product roadmap, a point of view about partners and competitors, and ideas about who the customer will be. The product is the end result of this strategy. See the chart on this page. Product strategy vision. Product strategy vision. Product change constantly through the process of optimization, what I call tuning the engine. Less frequently, the strategy may have to change, call a pivot. However, the over, over, overarching vision rarely changes. Entrepreneurs are committed to seeing the startup through to that destination. Every setback is an opportunity for learning how to get where they want to go. See the chart below. Change, optimization, pivot, product strategy vision. In real life, a startup is a portfolio of activities, a lot of happening simultaneously. The engine is running, acquiring new customers and serving existing one. We are turning, trying to improve our product marketing and operations, and we are staying deciding if and when to pivot. The challenges of entrepreneurship is to balance all these activities. Even the smallest startups face the challenge of supporting existing customers while trying to innovate. Even the most established company face the imperative to invest in innovation lest it becomes obsolete. A company's grow, what changes is the mix of these activities in the company portfolio of work. Entrepreneurship is the management, and yet imagine a modern manager who is tasked with building a new product in the context of an established company. Imagine that she goes back to her company chief financial officer, CFO, a year later and say, we have failed to meet the growth targets we predicted. In fact, we have almost no new customer and no new revenue. However, we have learned an incredible amount and are on the cusp of a breakthrough. new line of business. All we need is another year. Most of the time, this would be the last report this entrepreneur would give her employer. The reason is that in general management, a failure to deliver result is due to either a failure to plan adequately or a failure to execute properly. Both are significant lapses, yet new product development in our modern economy routinely require exactly this kind of failure on the way to greatness. In the lean startup movement, we have come to realize that these internal innovators are actually entrepreneurs too, and that entrepreneurial management can help them succeed. This is the subject of the next chapter. Define who exactly is an entrepreneur. As I travel the world talking about the lean startup, I am consistently surprised that I met people in the audience who seems out of place. In addition to the more traditional startup entrepreneur I met, these people are general manager, mostly working in very large companies who are tasked with creating new ventures or product innovation. They are adept at organizational politics. They know how to form automation division. They know how to form autonomous division with separate profit and loss statement, and can shield controversial teams from cop- corporate meddling. The biggest surprise is that they are visionaries like the startup founders I have worked with for years. They can see the future of their industries and are prepared to take bold risks to seek out new and innovative solutions to the problem their companies face. Mark, for example, is a manager for an extremely large company who came to one of my lecture. He is the leader of a division that recently had been chartered to bring his company into the 21st century by building a new suite of products designed to take advantage of the internet. When he came to talk to me afterward, I started to give him the standard advice about how to create innovation teams inside big companies, and he stopped me in midstream. Yeah, I read the innovator's dilemma. I've got that all taken care of. He was a long term employee of the company and a successful manager to boot. So managing internal politics was the least of his problem. I should have known. His success was a testament to his ability to navigate the company's corporate policies, personal and processes to get things done. Next, I tried to give him some advice about the future, about cool, new, highly leveraged product development technologies. He interrupted me again. Right, I know all about the internet and I have a vision for how our company needs to adapt it, how our company needs to adopt to it or die. Mark has all the entrepreneur prerequisite: nail, proper team structure, good personal, and a strong vision for the future, and an appetite for risk taking. And so it finally occurred to me to ask why he was coming to me for advice. He said, "It's as if we have all of the raw material, kindling wood, paper, flint, even some spark, but where's the fire?" The theories of management that Mark had studied treat innovation like a black box by focusing on the structure companies need to put in place to form internal startup teams. But Mark found himself working inside the black box and in need of guidance. What Mark was missing was a process for converting the raw material of innovation into a real world breakthrough success. Once a team is set up, what should it do? What process should it use? how should it be held accountable to performance milestones? These are questions the lean startup methodology is designed to answer. My point My point, Mark, is an entrepreneur just like a Silicon Valley high tech founder with a garage startup. He needs the principle of the lean startup just as much as the folk I thought of a classical entrepreneurs do. Entrepreneurs who operate inside an established organization sometimes are called entrepreneur because of the special circumstances that attend building a startup within a larger company, as I have applied lean startup ideas in an ever widening variety of companies and industry. I have come to believe that entrepreneurs have much more in common with the rest of the community of entrepreneurs than most people believe. Thus, when I use the term entrepreneur, I am referring to the world startup ecosystem, regardless of the company size, sector, or stage of the development. This book is for entrepreneurs of all stripes, from young visionaries with little backing but great ideas to seasoned visionary with larger companies such as Mark and the people who hold them accountable. If I am an entrepreneur, what's a startup? The lean startup is a set of practices for helping entrepreneurs increase their odds of building a successful startup. To set the record straight, it's important to define what a startup is. A startup is a human institution designed to create a new product or service under condition of extreme uncertainty. I've come to realize that the most important part of this definition is what it omits. It says something about the size of the company, the industry, or the sector of the economy. Anyone who is creating a new product or business under condition of extreme uncertainty is an entrepreneur, whether he or she knows it or not, and whether working in a government agency, a venture backed company, a non-profit, or a decide, decidedly for profit company for decidedly for profit company with financial investor. Let's take a look at each of the P's. The word institution connotes bureaucracy, process, even liturgy. How can that be part of a startup? Yet successful startups are full of activities associated with building an institution, hiring creative employees, coordinating their activities and creating a company culture that delivers results. We often lose sight of the fact that a startup is not just about a product, a technological breakthrough, or even a brilliant idea. A startup is a greater than the sum of its parts. It is a actually human enterprise. The fact that a startup product or service is a new innovation is also an essential part of the definition and a tricky part too. I prefer to use a broadcasting definition of product, one that encompasses any source of values for the people who become customer. Anything those customer experience from their interaction with a company should be considered part of that company product. This is a true of a grocery store, an e-commerce website, a consulting service, and a non-profit social service agency. In every case, the organization is dedicated to uncovering a new source of value for customers and cares about the impact of its product on those customers. It's also important that the word innovation be understood broadly. Startup use many kind of innovation, novel scientific discoveries, repurposing an exciting technology for a new usage, devising a new business model that unlocks value that was hidden, or simply bringing a product or service to a new location or a previously underserved set of customers. In all these cases, innovation is at the heart of the company's success. There is one more important part of this definition: the context in which the innovation happens. Most businesses Large and small alike are excluded from this context. Startups are designed to confront a situation of extreme uncertainty, to open up a new business that is an exact clone for an existing business, all the way down to the business model, pricing, target customers, and a product may be an product may be an attractive economic investment, but it is not a startup because its success depends only on execution so much so that this success can be modeled with a high accuracy. This is why so many small businesses can be financed with simple bank loans. The level of risks and uncertainty is understood well enough that a loan officer can assess its prospect. Most tools from general management are not designed to flourish is the harsh soul of extreme uncertainty in which a startup thrive. The future is unpredictable. Customer face a growing area of alternative and the pace of change is ever increasing, yet most startup in garage and enterprises like still are managed by using standard forecast, product milestones and detailed business plans. The SnapText story. In 2009, a startup decided to try something really audacious. They wanted to liberate taxpayer from expensive tax store by automating the process of collecting information typically found on W-2 forms, the end of year statement the most employees receive from their employer that summarize their taxable wages for the year. The startup quickly ran into difficulties even though many consumers had access to a printer scanner in their home or office. Few knew how to use those devices. After numerous conversations with potential customer, the team led upon the idea of having customer take photograph of their forms directly from their cell phone. In the process of testing this concept, customer asked something unexpected: would it be possible to finish the whole text written on the phone itself? This was not an easy task. Traditional tax preparation requires customers to wade through hundreds of questions, many forms, and a lot of paperwork. This startup tried something novel by deciding to ship an early version of its product that could be so much less than a complete text package. The initial version worked only for consumer with a simple return to file and it work only in California. Instead of having consumer fill out a complex form, they allow the customer to use the phone camera, take a picture of their W-2 forms from the single picture. The company developed the technology to compile and file most of the 1040 EZ tax return. Compare with the drudgery of traditional tax filing, the new product called SnapText provides a magical experience. From its modest beginning, SnapText grew into significant startup. Significant startup success. Its nationwide launch in 2011 showed their customer love it to the tune of more than 350,000 downloads in the first 3 weeks. This is the kind of amazing innovation you expect from a new startup. However, the name of the company may surprise you. SnapText was developed by Intuit, America's largest producer of finance, tax, and the accounting tools for individual and small businesses with more than 7,700 employees and annual revenues in the billions. Intuit is not a typical startup. The team that builds SnapText doesn't look much like the archetypal image of entrepreneur either. They don't work in a garage or eat ramen noodles. Their company doesn't lack for resources. They are paid a full salary and benefit. They come into a regular office every day, yet they are entrepreneurs. Stories like this one are not nearly as common inside large corporations as they should be. After all, SnapText competes directly with one of the Intuit flagship products, the fully featured TurboTax desktop software. Usually, companies like Intuit fall into the trap described in Clayton Christensen, The Innovator's Dilemma. They are very good at creating incremental improvement to existing product and services existing customer, which Kristen call sustaining innovation, but struggle to create breakthrough new product disruptive innovation that can create new sustainable source of growth. One remarkable part of the SnapTech story is what the team leaders said when I asked them to account for their unlikely success. Did they hire superstar entrepreneur from outside the company? No. They assemble a team from within Intuit. They they face constant meddling from senior management? What is the ban of the innovation teams in many companies? No, their executive sponsor created an island of freedom where they could experiment as necessary. Did they did they have a huge team, a large budget, and lots of marketing dollars? No, they started with a team of five. What allowed the SnapText teams to innovate was not their gen's destiny or astrological sign, but a process deliberately facilitated by Intuit senior management. Innovation is a bottom up, decentralized, and unpredictable things, but that doesn't mean it cannot be managed. It can, but to do so requires a new management discipline, one that needs to be mastered not just by the practicing entrepreneurs seeking to build the next big thing, but also by the people who support them, nurture them, and hold them accountable. In other words, cultivating entrepreneurship is the responsibility of senior management today. A cutting edge company such as Intuit can point to success story like SnapText because it has recognized the need for a new management paradigm. This is a this is the realization that was years in the making. A 7,000 person lean startup. In 1983, Intuit founder, the legendary entrepreneur Scott Cook, had the radical notion with co founder Tom Prolox the personal accounting should happen by computers. Their success was far from inevitable. They faced numerous competitors, an uncertain future, and an initial tiny market. Decided later, the company went public and subsequently fended off well publicized attack from larger incumbents, including the software behemoth Microsoft, partially with the help of famed venture capitalist John Deere. Intuit became a fully diversified enterprise, a member of the Fortune 1000 that now provides dozens of market-leading products across its major divisions. This is the kind of entrepreneurial success we are used to hearing about, a ragtag team of underdogs who eventually achieve fame, acclaim, and significant riches. Flash forward to 2002, Cook was frustrated. He had just tabulated 10 years of data of all the Intuit's new product introduction and had concluded that the company was getting a measly return on its massive investment. Simply put, too many of its new products were failing by traditional standard. Intuit is an extremely well managed company, but as Scott dug into the root cause of those failure, he came to a difficult conclusion. The prevailing management paradigm he and his company had been practicing was inadequate to the problem of continuous innovation in the modern economy. By fall 2009, Cook had been working to change Intuit management culture for several years. He came across my early work on the lean startup and asked me to give a talk at Intuit in Silicon Valley. This is not the kind of invitation you turn down. I admit I was curious. I was still at the beginning of my lean startup journey and didn't have much appreciation for the challenges faced by a Fortune thousand company like this. My conversation with Cook and Intuit Chief Executive Officer CEO Brand Smith were my initiation into the thinking of modern general manager who struggle with entrepreneurship every bit as much as do venture capitalists and founders in a garage. To combat these challenges, Scott and Brand are going back to intuitive roots. They are working to build entrepreneurship and risk taking into all their division. For example, consider one of the Intuit's flagship products because TurboTax does most of its sale around tax season in the United States. It's used to have an extremely conservative culture. Over the course of the year, the marketing and the product teams would conceive one major initiative that would be rolled out just in time for tax season. Now they test over 500 different changes in a 2.5 month tax season. They are running up to 70 different tax per week. The team can make a change live on its website on Thursday, run it over the weekend, read the result on Monday, and come on conclusion starting Tuesday. Then they rebuild new tasks on Thursday and launch the next set on Thursday night. As Scott put it, boy, the amount of learning they get is just immense now, and what it does is develop entrepreneur, because when you have only one task you don't have entrepreneur. You have politicians because you have to sell out of 100 good ideas. You have got to sell your idea, so you build up a society of politicians and salespeople. When you have 500 tasks you are running, then everybody ideas can run, and then you create an entrepreneur who run and learn and can retell and relearn, as opposed to a society of politicians. So we are trying to drive that throughout organization using examples which have nothing to do with high tech, like the website example. Every business today has a website. You don't have to be high tech to use fast cycle testing. This kind of changes is hard. After all, the company has a significant numbers of existing customers who continue to demand exceptional services and investors who expect a steady growing return. Scott say it goes against the grain of what people have been taught in the business and what leaders have been taught. The problem isn't with the team or the entrepreneur. They love the chance to quickly get their baby out into the market. They love the chance to have the customer vote instead of the suits voting. The real issue is with the leaders and the middle manager. There are many business leaders who have been successful because of analysis. They think they are analysts and their job is to do great planning and analyzing and have a plan. The amount of time a company can count on holding on to market leadership to exploit its earlier innovation, it's shrinking, and this creates a imperative for even the most encourage companies to invest in innovation. In fact, I believe a company only sustainable path to long-term economic growth is to build an innovation factory that use lean startup technique to create disruptive innovation on a continuous basis. In other words, established companies need to figure out how to accomplish what Scott Cook did in 1983, but on an industrial scale and with an established cohort of managers steeped in traditional management culture. Ever the Maverick Cook asks me to put these ideas to the test, and so I gave a talk that was simulcast to all 7,000 plus Intuit employees, during which I explained the theory of the lean startup, repeating my definition: an organization designed to create new products and services under condition of extreme uncertainty. What happened next is it in my memory. CEO Brand Smith had been sitting next to me as I spoke. When I was done, he got up and said before all of Intuit employees, "Folks, listen up. You heard Eric definition of a startup. It has three parts, and we here at Intuit match all the, and we here at Intuit match all three parts of that definition."